The girl with silver eyes. The space station was loud, crowded, and smelled like oil, metal, and alien food. Evan, a quiet human engineer, had just arrived for a short maintenance contract. He kept his head down and his tools close. He didn't like crowds. He liked machines. Machines didn't talk back or ask questions. His job was to repair an old vent system on Deck 9, near the older docking bays. Most crew avoided that section. It was dim, cold, and too quiet. Just how Evan liked it. But that day, something strange happened. The glowing girl. While fixing a busted panel, Evan heard soft footsteps behind him. He turned quickly. A woman stood there. Tall. Thin. Skin like pale silver blue light. Hair long and dark like shadows. But her eyes were what froze him. They were silver. Not dull metal silver. They shimmered, like starlight trapped in glass. She just stood there. Watching him. Not blinking. Evan cleared his throat. "Can I help you?" She stepped forward. Her voice was soft, calm, and clear. "You don't remember me, do you? Human?" Evan blinked, confused. Should I? She tilted her head gently. "You used to give me candy." Vanished. Before Evan could speak, she turned and walked away, silent, smooth, almost floating. He stood there, stunned. Candy? Who was she? How did she know him? He dropped his tools and walked out into the hallway. But she was gone. No sound. No trace. Just the faint scent of something sweet, like fruit and warm air. The wrapped candy. That night, Evan returned to his tiny bunk room. He took off his jacket, tossed it onto the table, and froze. There, in his jacket pocket, was a candy. Small. Round. Wrapped in silver paper. He pulled it out slowly. He hadn't bought it. Hadn't seen it before. But somehow, it felt familiar. He sat down, staring at it. A memory flickered in the back of his mind. A dark alley. Cold rain. A small alien girl, crying and alone. And a boy, him, kneeling beside her, handing her something. A candy. Who was she? Evan didn't sleep much. He searched the station logs. Tried facial scans. Nothing matched. She wasn't on the crew list. She wasn't on the passenger logs. It was like she didn't exist. But he saw her. He heard her voice. "You don't remember me. Human." The way she said human didn't sound angry. It sounded sad. Like she had waited a long time. The second meeting. The next day, Evan walked the same path. Same hallway. Same vent. He hoped it was just his imagination. But deep down, he wanted to see her again. And he did. She stood in the shadows at the far end of the corridor. Same silver eyes. Same stillness. She didn't move. She didn't speak. But in her hand, was another candy. She placed it gently on the floor. Then turned and disappeared into the dark. Evan picked it up. This one had his name written on it. Evan. His hands shook. Who was she? How did she know? And why, did her eyes look like they had been waiting for years? She knows everything about him. Evan tried to ignore it. The strange girl. The silver eyes. The candy with his name on it. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe he was just tired. But when he walked into the repair bay that morning, something felt different. His tools were already laid out. Not by him. Everything was exactly the way he liked it. down to the tiny screwdriver he always used last. He frowned. No one else knew his routine. He never told anyone. And yet, it was already done. The voice behind him. As he reached for the scanner, he heard a soft voice. "You still like things neat." He spun around. She was there again. Same quiet stare. Same silver eyes. Her hair hung loose this time, flowing over her shoulder like water. She didn't blink. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm the one you helped. A long time ago." "I don't remember." She stepped closer. Not threatening, just curious. Gentle. "But I remember you." Evan tried to keep calm. "Why now? Why find me here?" She gave a small smile. "Because I found the name tag you gave me." The name tag. Evan's eyes widened. Back then, on a colony street, he had found a lost alien child hiding behind a supply crate. He gave her a candy to stop her from crying, and tore his old name tag from his shirt. He had said, "If you ever need help, find me." He hadn't thought she understood. He had forgotten. But she hadn't. She knows too much. Later that evening, he sat in the food court. He hadn't told anyone about the encounter. He just ate quietly, like always. Then the screen at the far wall lit up with a music video, an old Earth song he loved as a teen. One no one else here would ever know. The same moment the song started playing, she walked in. And sat down at the far table, facing him. She didn't say a word. She just watched. And smiled. The crew starts talking. Over the next few days, whispers began. "That alien girl, she keeps watching that human. Some imprint thing? No. Too calm. Too quiet. Creepy, even. Maybe she's marking him." Evan heard it all. He didn't know how to explain it. He didn't feel scared. He felt seen. And strangely, he didn't want it to stop. She leaves a message. That night, Evan returned to his room and found something else waiting. Another candy. Same wrapping. Same silver paper. This time, it had a short message. "I'm not here to scare you. I'm here because you made me feel safe, when I had nothing." Ending hook. Evan stared at the message, heart beating faster. He didn't know what this was. But he knew one thing now. She hadn't forgotten a single detail about him. And he was finally starting to remember her. The gift she can't return. The next day, Evan found something new on his workbench. It wasn't a candy this time. It was a small cube, about the size of his palm. Dark metal, smooth edges, glowing faintly at the center. He knew what it was. A memory crystal. But not human. Alien. Rare. And illegal on most stations without permission. Taped to it was a tiny note in neat handwriting. "Don't open this in front of anyone. This is yours." No name. No signature. But Evan already knew who had left it. The crystal activates. He waited until his shift ended. Then he returned to his bunk, locked the door, and dimmed the lights. He placed the cube on the table and gently pressed the glowing center. It clicked once. And then, light filled the room. A vision appeared. Not a hologram. A memory. But not his. Through her eyes. Evan saw himself. But not as he was now. As a teenager. Leaning down in the rain. Soaking wet. Holding out a candy with a crooked smile. "Hey, you okay?" He saw her, but through her own eyes. Tiny hands. Trembling. Eyes full of tears and hunger. She didn't understand his words then. But she felt the tone. The warmth. And when he gave her the candy. See? Not scary. Just sweet. That moment burned itself into her soul. And she never forgot. The tag that changed everything. In the memory, he pulled off his old name tag and handed it to her. Here. If you ever need someone. I'm Evan. He never thought she'd keep it. But she did. And that moment became her only memory of safety, of kindness, of a face she could trust. Back to reality. The crystal faded. The light disappeared. Evan sat in silence. His own voice, so much younger, so full of hope, still echoed in his ears. He had forgotten her. But to her, that moment had meant everything. She appears again. Later that night, she was waiting in the hallway outside his room. Same silver eyes. Same quiet glow. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. He walked toward her, slowly. I saw it, he said. All of it. Her lips parted slightly. Do you understand now? Evan nodded. You've been carrying that moment your whole life. Yes, she whispered. It's the only thing that kept me going. Ending hook. She held out the name tag. Still scratched. Still old. Still his. This was your gift. But it changed me. I tried to forget it, but I couldn't. So I came to return it. Evan didn't take it. Instead, he reached into his pocket. And pulled out the candy she gave him days ago. Then I guess I owe you one back. The bond she never let go. The name tag still rested in her open palm. Evan looked at it, silent. It was scratched, worn, and a little bent. But she had carried it all this time. You kept it, he whispered. She nodded slowly, her silver eyes glowing softly in the dim hallway. It was the first thing anyone ever gave me that wasn't out of fear, or control. She placed it gently back in her coat pocket. Then said the words that made Evan stop breathing for a moment. And it bonded me to you. The bonding instinct. They sat in the quiet crew garden later that night, under fake stars on the dome ceiling. No one else was around. She finally told him everything. Her name was Rinyal. She belonged to a species called the Valari, quiet, advanced, and long-lived. Their children bonded to protectors during extreme fear or trauma. It's rare, she said, voice soft. Only one bond like that happens in a Valari's lifetime. If it's formed in childhood, it becomes permanent. Evan stared at her. So, all this time, you've been. She looked at him gently. Carrying you. In memory. In instinct. In everything I am. The unspoken fear. She turned away suddenly, voice shaking. I was scared to find you. What if you didn't remember? What if I meant nothing to you? Evan felt a weight settle in his chest. You never gave me the chance to remember. She smiled weakly. And now? He didn't answer at first. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out the candy she gave him. Now I remember everything. He placed it in her hand. And I'm ready to make a new memory. Not just memory, feeling. She didn't cry. But her glow brightened. Not just in her skin. In her voice. In her presence. She said. You don't have to bond back. I just needed you to know. I know, Evan replied. But maybe. I want to. The first real touch. She held out her hand, palm open, shaking slightly. Evan looked at it. Then reached out. Their hands touched, softly. No sparks. No light show. No sci-fi explosion. Just warmth. Real warmth. And in that simple connection, something passed between them. Not through tech. Not through words. Just through feeling. Ending hook. Somewhere, deep inside the station's communication tower. A monitor blinked. A surveillance log flagged an alert. Unregistered Volari human imprint detected. Emotional sync confirmed. Subject, Evan Riles. And below that. Notify command. The bond has begun. Someone wants her gone. Evan woke to a sharp knock at his door. 3 taps. Quick. Cold. He opened it, and 2 station officers stood outside in black uniforms. Engineer Riles, one said. You've been requested for questioning. Now. No explanation. No warning. Just orders. Interrogation Room 3. Evan sat in a small white room with no windows. Across from him was Officer Venn, a high-ranking security lead with cybernetic eyes and a voice like stone. You've been in contact with an unregistered alien citizen, Venn said. Her name is Rinyal, Evan replied calmly. She's done nothing wrong. Venn slid a datapad across the table. On it, footage. Rinyal leaving Candies. Standing outside Evan's quarters. Their hands touching. Even the moment in the garden under the stars. This isn't friendship, Venn said. This is imprinting. And that's not allowed here. Evan stared at him. Why not? Because once a Volari bonds, their emotions bleed into ours. Their instincts mix with ours. And humans can't handle it. She's been marked for transfer. She'll be moved to another facility in 12 hours, Venn said. For observation. Permanently. She's not a threat. Not yet, Venn replied. But she will be, once you stop caring and she doesn't. Evan's voice dropped. I won't stop caring. Venn narrowed his eyes. We've heard that before. The goodbye that hurt. That night, Evan found Rinyal in the greenhouse, her favorite place. She didn't smile when she saw him. She already knew. They're moving me, aren't they? Evan nodded. Tomorrow morning. She turned away, her glow dimming. Then tonight. I won't ask for anything. You don't have to ask, he said. But she didn't move closer. If you touch me again, the bond will finish. And they'll never let you leave this station. You'll be marked too. Evan stepped back. It hurt. But he understood. Sometimes love meant waiting. Even when your heart was already reaching out. The candy in the airlock. The next morning, Evan walked to docking bay 3. But her transport was already gone. He stood at the airlock. On the small bench outside, something shimmered. A silver-wrapped candy. And under it. A note. Even if they take me far away. I'll still be looking at the stars, hoping you're looking too. Ending hook. Evan picked up the candy. He didn't cry. He just whispered. I'll find you again. Next time, you won't have to wait. But behind him, Officer Venn watched from the shadows. And sent a silent message through his comm. He's already too deep. The bond is stronger than we thought. The memory he finally remembers. Evan sat alone in the dark maintenance tunnel, far from cameras and crew. The silver-wrapped candy lay in his hand, unopened. He had stared at it for hours. Not because of what it was. But because of what it meant. The last thing she gave him before being taken away. I'll still be looking at the stars. Her words echoed in his mind like a soft heartbeat. He closed his eyes. And that's when it happened. The memory returns. He was a teenager again. Rain falling. Boots splashing in a dark alley on Colony Vega, 7. He was running, late for curfew. That's when he saw her, a small alien girl curled up beside a vent. Shivering. Terrified. He had crouched down, reached into his pocket, and handed her a candy. She had stared at it with wide silver eyes. But there was something else. Something he had forgotten. The promise. As he stood to leave, the girl had tugged on his sleeve. Barely able to speak. Her small hand pressed a strange pendant into his palm. It glowed faintly. She looked up at him and whispered one broken word. Mine. At the time, he thought it meant, thank you. But now, he knew what it really meant. She had chosen him. That was the moment her bond had started. And he had accepted the pendant. Without knowing what it meant. The pendant in the locker. Evan rushed to his old locker, the one from his academy days. He hadn't touched it in years. Inside a metal box was something he hadn't seen since childhood. A tiny pendant, smooth and silver, shaped like a drop of water. Still glowing. Still warm. His hand shook as he held it. It had never stopped calling to him. He just hadn't listened. The call across stars. That night, Evan hacked into the station's secure comms. He didn't care if Ven was watching. He didn't care if it got him arrested. He activated the pendant's pulse frequency. One signal. Just one. If you can hear me, he said into the mic. You're not alone. I remember everything now. And this time. I'm not letting go. Rinal's eyes open. Somewhere across the galaxy, on a transport ship drifting through hyperspace. Rinal's eyes snapped open. The silver glow in her chest flared to life. She held her own pendant, twin to his, and whispered. He remembers. He called me back. Ending hook. Back on the station, Officer Ven stood in the shadows, listening to the comm signal Evan had just sent. He didn't stop it. He simply said into his wrist comm. Phase 2 has begun. The human chose her, fully. The candy wasn't the sweetest thing. The stars were quiet as the shuttle touched down on the far side of Moon Station Juno. No crowd. No cameras. Just two souls. One waiting. One returning. Evan stood by the platform, heart racing. He clutched the glowing pendant around his neck. He had risked everything to send that message, broken protocol, defied orders, ignored fear. But none of it mattered. Because she had answered. The moment she stepped off. The shuttle door hissed open. And there she was. Rinal. Same glowing skin. Same long dark hair. But something had changed. Her silver eyes weren't sad anymore. They were filled with something else. Joy. She stepped forward slowly. No guards. No chains. No fear. Just her. And him. No more distance. She stopped in front of him. Neither of them spoke at first. Then Evan reached into his jacket pocket, and held out a small, familiar object. A candy. Wrapped in silver foil. Her eyes shimmered with quiet laughter. Still sweet? She asked. Always, he said. She took it gently and smiled. But you were sweeter. The bond completes. They reached for each other, no longer afraid. Their fingers touched. No pain. No control. Just choice. The twin pendants around their necks pulsed together, soft blue light surrounding them both. And in that quiet moment, the imprint they had shared for so long finally became a bond. The galaxy watches. On the edge of the universe, systems buzzed. Valari officials received the signal. Human records updated. New category, confirmed emotional imprint, cross-species accepted. And in the hidden corners of the galaxy, others whispered. A human made the bond, by heart. He remembered. He returned. Maybe they're not so different from us after all. Epilogue, the sweetest thing. Weeks later, they sat under the artificial stars again, this time, side by side. Rinal leaned on Evan's shoulder, holding a half-unwrapped candy. You know, she said softly, the candy was nice. But the sweetest thing, was being remembered. Evan smiled. And I'll keep remembering. Every day. Their fingers intertwined. 2 worlds. 1 memory. 1 bond. And the beginning of everything new. White heavy check mark the end.